Mr. Chair,
three bills.
I have three bills. I'm going to start with Senate Bill 1367.
Okay.
And I will direct your attention to the statute that deals with abuse and neglect. And I will tell you that in 2021, our local agencies responded to more than 120,000 cases of alleged abuse and neglect, and more than half of those were invalidated. And so what I bring to you is language that's inserted into the statute that makes an attempt to do what other states have done, and that is clarify what is abuse and neglect and create some clarity with some specificity about the independence of children. So that in some cases where I fear that we often weaponize allegations, where we often are unclear about the sort of how vague this may be, or we have investigations that are unnecessarily traumatic or disruptive for families, where we, rather than focus where there may be some vagueness, that we are really clear about what's abuse and neglect and focus on the cases that are truly abuse and neglect, and not the situation where a child might be allowed to go somewhere and walk to school, for example, or ride their bike somewhere by themselves, or do something that some parents might see as just allowing their children to be independent, and somebody else might see as abuse or neglect. And so if you look at the bottom of number 2, where under the definition of abuse and neglect, and you go under little 4, it'll say, no child whose parent or other person responsible for his care allows the child to engage in reasonable, independent activities without adult supervision. So basically, this is accepting it. It lays out what abuse and neglect is, and it says that it shall not be a reason alone be considered to be abuse or neglect, provided that the independent activities are appropriate based on the child's age, maturity, physical, and mental abilities. Such independent activities will include traveling to or from school, nearby locations by bicycle or on foot, playing outdoors, remaining at home for a reasonable period of time, and so forth. So it's really just a question of where you are philosophically on how you perceive the definition of abuse and neglect, how specific you think that language should be. States like Utah and Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma have done this and tightened up the language. And, sorry.
Question.
Senator Sassel.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question too.
It mentions here child. What do you consider, what age do you?
It's 18 and under. So for purposes of this statutory language, abuse or neglected child means any child less than 18 years of age.
Well, one of the things in the summary says to and from school. So
The reason that we're clarifying that is because the statute itself has been perceived by some to be vague, and there have been allegations that allowing what you or I might view as just regular independent activities, letting my child walk somewhere to or from school, or do something that I view safe, somebody else might view as completely not safe and as abuse and neglect. And so that's why this clarification is here.
Mr. Chairman.
There are other people, I think, who might want to speak to this and can maybe clarify what the genesis of this
it
is.
just seems so unreasonable to me. A 16 or 17-year-old going to school. When I was 11, growing up in D.C., 11 years old, I was hitchhiking all over the city and going to school. I mean, I don't get.
Mr. Chair, when my husband was 5 years old, he walked like 10 city blocks in San Francisco.
That
on
is
the
not
corner of
abuse.
Haight Street, right. But a lot of parents would say that's abuse.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Senator.
And Mr. Chair, I should say that
stop.
Senator Boysko is a patron of this bill, so I apologize that she's.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Servell, McClellan, and Boysko.
I have a question for council. So the problem that I see with this, and perhaps you can clarify it for me or confirm it, is this particular definition applies in criminal statutes. I just looked at it. Applies in 3 different places in Title 18.2. And There's a case, the United States Supreme Court and the Supreme Court of Virginia have both held that you cannot use a reasonableness standard in a criminal statute because it is unconstitutionally vague, because it doesn't put a person on notice as to what conduct is criminal or not criminal, and because different juries and judges can reach completely opposite conclusions on the exact same conduct. I think the Supreme Court of Virginia threw out a Virginia Beach noise ordinance statute about 6 years ago because it said you can't play noise unreasonably loud.
I see it.
And the other case from the United States Supreme Court said you can't set prices at an unreasonable amount during a war. And they brought some case in World War I about price fixing over sugar or something, and the Supreme Court of the United States threw it out. And so I was just curious whether counsel thought we might be running afoul of the Constitution in terms of providing people with proper notice as to what's a crime by using this reasonableness standard in this definition, because reasonableness is not something we normally see in 18.2.
Mr. Chairman, certainly any defense counsel would raise that objection, but that's about as far as I can go.
Senator McClellan's got it.
I think Senator Sassaw now realizes that he likes this bill because it would clarify that what he did as a child is not, his parents did not engage in child abuse.
Senator Boysko's got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, I'm the chief co-patron on this, but would you be able to tell us some of the organizations that support this bill and could share some stories of families that have interacted with the justice system because they let their children go to the library, for instance?
So I didn't want to trespass because I know there are some people who would very much like to speak, and I also know that this committee has a very long docket. So rather than me say it and then you ask for people to speak, I was going to just lay it out and then let some of your speakers who are here make the case. So if Mr. Chair would like to ask for anybody who would like to speak.
That's fine, but I want to know, like on line 38, what nearby means. Is that defined anywhere?
No, sir, Mr. Chair.
The
Nearby.
term safe location on line 40. Do we know what that is, or whether that is it a safe location at all day, or is there a time limit on that, or how do we define that?
So, Mr. Chair, you're taking what is vague, no doubt, in the statutory language, and you are for sure including some less vague language with some also vague language in that less vague language. But what you're attempting to do is to clarify the kinds of things that would be excluded, like going to and from school, allowing somebody who's 16 or 15 or 17 years old to have reasonable independence. I think that's what it is that we're looking for, because if you look culturally where we are now, it's very different than where we are some time ago. And you can see that someone would allege abuse and neglect in categories that aren't abuse and neglect, and we wouldn't, and nobody would really characterize it that way. And that's why we have 120,000 cases, and more than half of them are clearly not cases of abuse and neglect. And so I think what we want to do is do what other states have done and said, let's bring some clarity to this. Let's try to make the system work better. Let's not allow the system to be weaponized. Let's not disrupt families. And let's be really, what I think is realistic about what it is, what our expectations are here. And so I understand your question about the language. I understand what I would imagine.
You understand that judges one place might interpret
Absolutely.
those terms a little bit differently than they do in other places.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Peterson.
I read this as basically a jury instruction. That this would be, if you had a jury, you'd hand this up as an instruction, and the jury would have to draw their own conclusions. But it clearly gives a roadmap as to how to get there.
Mr. Chairman,
Steve.
okay, so I agree with everything that's been said about this very well-intentioned common sense bill. And I agree with Senator Peterson that this provides a roadmap for a jury instruction. The problem is the problem that has been identified by Senator Surivel, that people are entitled to clear, objective notice of what conduct is or is not criminal. Right. And so even if we struck the word reasonable in front of independent activities, you're still stuck with line 37 where it says, provided that such independent activities are appropriate based on the child's age, maturity, physical and mental abilities. And people all day long will disagree as to what is appropriate. And that doesn't provide the sufficiently objective, neutral, and clear, unambiguous notice to the public of what conduct is or is not criminal.
Mr. Chair.
That's the problem.
Senator McClellan's got, she may want to disagree with you, Steve, I don't know.
Well, I don't know why, and I'm trying to pull up the line numbers, but I don't see why that would be any more vague than what's in an existing law that says, if you,
Line 23.
line 23, where
23.
you say if you refuse to provide care necessary for his health, who decides that? Where line 31, if a child is sufficiently mature to have an informed opinion, who decides that? I think there's already vagueness in the code. And what we're trying to do is put some parameters around to say there are some things that any reasonable person would see is not child abuse, but without some guidance in the code, people can and have been charged with child abuse for letting their 11-year-old walk a block to school, for letting, you've got a 13-year-old and you've got to go to the store 2 blocks away and you don't have a babysitter, but if you don't go to the store, they're not going to eat that night. Like, we're trying to put some common sense where things that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, everyone agreed was a reasonable thing for a parent to do with a child of, reasonable maturity, that now is being weaponized in ways we don't want. So we're not creating any more ambiguity than is already there, but we are creating more certainty that some things are not child abuse.
And Mr. Chair, there are a litany of cases, and again, I was hoping that the others would speak instead of me.
There are a bunch of people
Yeah.
behind you.
Oh.
And if we want, why
Yeah.
don't we just open up?
Yeah.
We've got a bunch of people
I
here
know, and I
today.
wanted to move this along, but I just wanted you to
Thank-
hear there are some outrageous instances of allegations of abuse and neglect for something that we would all understand to be a child having a reasonable, independent activity. So anyway, I'll let you.
Okay, we have several speakers. Let's keep it 1 minute apiece, okay?
If any participants on Zoom would like to speak in favor of this bill, please raise your hand electronically now.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Elsa Hackle. Hi, my name is Elsa Hackle. I will turn 12 this month. I love to read, I love nature, and I love to ride my bike. When I was a little kid, I looked forward to being able to go to the playgrounds, parks, and library all by myself. It made me feel grown up, and when my mom finally said I could, starting at my 9th birthday. My parents told me what to do if I got lost or if the police came. We had rules about where I could and couldn't be, and I could follow those rules. I knew I was ready. My first 2 trips were to the library. The first one went really well. I loved it. But on the way home to the second time, I was late, and I was walking and running to get home faster. Mom met up with me and said I was being tailed by a cop. I was. We talked and he sounded worried. I felt shocked and disappointed that he felt the need to follow me. Another time, I walked home from the bus and was surprised by 2 cops at the door. They showed up before I could get my coat off. They said they got a call about a kid alone in the cold seen going into this house. I called for my parents to come to the door, and the cops asked, "Are you the parents of this child?" I jumped in because I was scared I'd be taken away from them. I noticed there were 2 more officers outside. This was completely unnecessary. The callers saw me go into our house. They should have known I was safe. Since then, I haven't wanted to go out very often. I'm afraid that the next time I won't be able to defend myself and I'll be taken away by the police. Just for being a kid outside. I asked to help this bill get passed because I don't want anyone else to have to go through that fear.
Okay.
Please vote yes.
Thank you very much. Next. And I'd ask you to please try to limit it to a minute.
Thank you. My name is Evelyn Hackle. I live in Falls Church. I'm a naval architect, and I'm Elsa's mom. When I was 25, a fireman mistook me for a lost kid and tried to rescue me. My daughter is also small, so I delayed letting her walk to places like the library and the park longer than she or I wanted to ensure our legal safety. Then, as you heard, 4 cops showed up at our home because she walked home from her bus stop. Worried as I was, I never imagined there would be more police involved for that than when my neighbor was assaulted by a fugitive. My daughter firmly and calmly defended her rights, and I am so proud. But she shouldn't have needed to. The independent activities law is needed because it affirms that Virginia's kids and families have a right to some independence absent obvious danger. And since Elsa was never in any obvious danger, this would protect kids like her and parents like me while we let capable children grow into capable citizens.
Hi, my name is Anna Fields. I'm 9 years old. I live in Harrisburg, Virginia. I like playing outside and running around in the sun. I wanted to share this story with you. One day, my brother, sister, and I were all playing outside, and a neighbor stopped us and told us to go back inside. She thought we weren't safe because we didn't have any grown-ups around. I wanted to tell her that we were only one house away from our house, but she told us to go inside again. She said she's a social worker and she'll call the cops on our parents. I felt sad because we weren't allowed to play outside. I have permission to play there. I want my brother and sister to be allowed to play outside because we like playing in the rain. Most of the time, we play outside because we have an idea for a game. My parents know me best, and I know that I am old enough to play outside. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Emily Fields, and I'm Anna's mom. In 2018, we moved to Harrisburg, and we live in a quiet rural community where I thought my kids would have a great opportunity to grow up. In May of 2021, I was shocked when CPS showed up at our door. We were accused of neglect for letting the children play in the front yard. I was told that regardless of where my children are outside, I personally have to be visible to my neighbors so that they know that my children are supervised. They're now 9, 8, and 6, and like Anna told you, they were playing outside, and a social worker who lives in our neighborhood stopped and threatened to call the police because they were playing within line of sight of our kitchen. When my children ask if they can walk around our quiet block, I never ask myself if they're capable or if they'll be in danger. I know that they are safe and capable. The questions that I ask myself are, who is at home? Who is going to think that this is too much freedom for a child to have? So I am asking you today to please pass this and protect children's rights to independence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Valerie LaRue from Virginia Poverty Law Center. We support this bill. We hear from parents who call us with concerns about having let their child climb a tree or ride their bike in the neighborhood, those kinds of things. Typically, these are not criminal investigations. It's not in 18.2. This would impact mostly civil investigations by CPS. We view it as a friendly bill to CPS because it means it'll give them some more clarity of how to respond so they're not so burdened by, as Senator Vogel said, the 120,000 cases that they need to look into. And I know that there are some folks on the Zoom who are in support, and I believe the Action Alliance is also in support. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Are there people in the Zoom world?
Yes, there are.
Okay. I'd ask them to keep their remarks to a minute apiece. You're going to be cut off after a minute, okay? Thanks.
Will, you may unmute and speak, and Fallon, you are going to go next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Will Estrada. I'm the president of Parental Rights Foundation. I'm a resident of Loudoun County, Virginia. We are in support of this bill. It's a parental rights issue. It's an equity issue. Many of the families impacted by CPS neglect investigations are minority families. But I want to, and we represent families across the board who are found because of these issues that have been discussed. But I just want to address that vagueness issue. Senator McClellan is absolutely correct that there is so much vagueness in our neglect statutes. This will help them. 6 states have adopted them. This same bill with the reasonable language just went through Colorado unanimously, was signed into law by Governor Polis. We've not seen negative issues, so we would ask for your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next.
Hello, my name is Fallon Speaker. I am the legal director of the Youth Justice Program at the Legal Aid Justice Center. I will echo everything that has been stated so far, and Legal Aid Justice Center is in support of SB 1367. I have 10 years of experience in representing youth, parents, and families in child welfare proceedings, and what I can say is that this bill is important to help with clarification as it relates to the subjectiveness in the statute. The prior version of the statute allowed for subjective determinations of which instances of childhood independence were neglectful, risking bias due to race, class, and history. And this statute provides clarifying terms that can be equally applied. Because of that, Legal Aid Justice Center is proud to support this legislation.
Okay,
Thank you.
ma'am. Next.
Ali, you may unmute and speak, and Valerie, you will be next.
Good afternoon. My name is Ali Farouk. I'm with Families Forward Virginia. We are the Virginia chapter of Prevent Child Abuse America. We strongly support this bill, one, because we believe it'll take pressure off of our already strained and overwhelmed child protective services resources by preventing unnecessary calls to CPS, and 2, it will prevent unnecessary involvement to the child welfare system when we have so many children that desperately need those services but are being lost in the cracks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Next.
Good afternoon, Valerie Slater. I'm the executive director of Rise for Youth and a criminal defense attorney, and Rise for Youth supports this bill for all of the reasons you have already heard.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Are there people that have another view? Well, we have to hear from other people.
If anyone on Zoom would like to oppose this bill, please raise your hand electronically.
My name is Julia
Very
Sickle.
brave woman.
I know. I didn't want to stand up.
That's okay.
My name is Julia Sickle. I'm the Commonwealth Attorney for Westmoreland County, here speaking on behalf of VACA. We are not opposed to what this bill is saying. So I don't want anyone to think that we do not think. I have 3 children. I let them play without me there. But these are the problems that we see with. I know. These are the problems that we see. Number one, the cases of the individuals that were up here speaking, I didn't hear anybody say they had been arrested for abuse and neglect because of their actions. And I think that when police are called and a concern is made, even if this language is in the statute, it's still going to be investigated. You're not going to have somebody just say, we're not going to investigate it. So I'm not sure that it curtails the investigation of the cases, which has been talked about. What we can say from our perspective is these are not cases that we see prosecuted in Virginia. We are not bringing criminal charges against individuals who are letting their children go play outside or walk to the library. There is case law that's in effect now that talks about what felony child neglect is. And it talks about looking at the gravity and character of the possible risks of harm, the degree of accountability or accessibility of the parent, the length of time of the time the child's not around, the age and maturity of the child. So essentially there's case law that says these are the things we're supposed to look at. And what our concern is if these things are in place, it will make it more difficult for us to prosecute individuals who are committing abuse and neglect against their children. And I'm sorry, I'm the only.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there people in the Zoom world who wish to speak against the bill?
There are no speakers on Zoom, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
Senator Obenshain.
Mr. Chair, I don't know whether there's a desire to add language to this that addresses Senator Surville's concerns, but if there is, I would suggest that we look at the involuntary manslaughter instruction. I know this is taking this in a wholly different direction, but I don't mean to. But in which we say that the described conduct is not child abuse unless the defendant's failure to perform unless the defendant's conduct constituted negligence so gross, wanton, and culpable as to show a callous disregard for the safety of the child or children.
Okay, so that's another conceptual amendment, I guess. What's your?
Mr. Chair, if we look at line 15 and 16 and 17, wouldn't that cover where they're talking about abuse or neglect means any child whose parent or other person responsible creates or inflicts or threatens or creates or inflicts or allows to be created.
So your
physical
point
and
is the
medical.
language that Senator Obenshain suggested might be in conflict or might already be covered by language.
That's my question. I'm not arguing. I'm just raising the question. I feel like when I read this, I feel like it's clarifying that if you're putting a child in harm's way, and then and then under number 2, on number 23, whose parents or other parents responsible for his care neglects or refuses to provide care necessary for health. I don't know. I mean, it's your.
Don't look at me. I'm just trying to help my friend on the right wing of the committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Morrissey's next, but you are.
Well, I'm trying to address his
Okay,
issue.
you want to address this?
Yeah, I mean, I support the concept of the bill. I want you to pass a law that's going to be actually enforced. And I'm telling you, if you put reasonable in a criminal statute, you run very thin ice. And that's what I'm trying to get at. And I think using the types of language that Senator Obenshain just mentioned is much more likely to be sustained in court and actually get you the result you want. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish here. So it might require a little bit more careful wordsmithing, and
So, Mr. Chair.
perhaps between here and the floor we could do that or
Right,
something.
so here's what I'm very desperate to do. You understand the mission here. The goal and the mission is to create some level of independence for children where it's very clear that this independence is allowed, does not neglect. And they said it way better than I ever could. And so if there is a way between now and when this goes to the floor that perhaps could be amended with language that's agreeable to everybody, and you heard how many people believe from CPS to everybody else, if we could agree on language.
Senator Morrissey's still got a point to make, and I want him to be able to do that. But I'm gonna, if we do report the bill out of here, I'm gonna hope that you, Senator Vogel, get with Survell and Obenshain and figure out what that language looks like, if it's appropriate. Okay?
You bet.
Okay, Senator Morrissey.
Senator Vogel, I love your bill, okay? There are some portions of this bill that are open to interpretation, like lines 33 through 35, and I think that can be tightened up a little bit. But there's 3 things I really hate. I hate participation trophies, I hate coddling kids, and I dislike is a better word, parents who drive their children less than 1 block in their SUV while the engine runs to heat it or cool it, and then get on the bus, and then they're there. When the kids get back, get on the SUV and drive less than half a block home. I can't outlaw 2 of them, but the middle one, I think your bill comes closest to addressing. And while it may need a little tightening up so that there's no subjectivity to it, I hope that this body supports this bill.
Move to report.
Senator Boyce, we got a motion to report. Is there a second? Okay, are there other motions?
I would just say, Mr. Chair, I really appreciate it because independent children are very successful adults. I promise you.
And assuming that this gets out of here, I'm hoping that you all get together and figure out whether there's any way to tighten up.
Except for Sasslaw. He's an anomaly.
My second grade teacher told my mother I was a little criminal.
Okay, open the roll and vote yea is a vote to report. Hold on a second, strike that. Do we have to send this to finance? No. Okay.
No, mercifully.
Please open the roll.
And thank you so much to everybody who testified.
Okay.
I got 2 more bills.
I've got Edwards too, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Ayes 15, no zero.
You've got two more bills.